We are back, and we are at the point in the debate where each candidate will be given a chance to ask his opponent a question. Based upon a drawing of cards, Mr. Ashford goes first.
Don, I have only 3 Democrats have voted more times than me with Republicans. The Congressional Quarterly has said that I am the sixth most bipartisan member of the United States Congress. They're an objective observer of the Hill. I have voted to buck my party on many, many occasions. I voted to keep Gitmo open. I voted against the Iran deal, and I voted for full accountability at the Veterans Administration. Would you pick 3 Republican initiatives or issues where you would buck your party? And tell me what those are.
Well, first of all, depending on who wins the presidency here this coming election, I will support NATO because I think NATO deserves the support. So if President Trump comes in and he makes that one of his initiatives, I'll stand and ensure that I'm a strong voice for NATO. I also will be careful about the use of force in Syria. I think I've seen combat firsthand, and I want to be careful about the use of force. And so I'll be a voice to ensure that we don't overreach and put ourselves in a bad situation.
Okay, 2 of them there, Mr. Ashford. NATO and Syria that Mr. Bacon just noted. You have 30 seconds.
I don't think those are, the Republicans on the Armed Services Committee support NATO wholeheartedly. So I don't think that's a Republican position that you'd be bucking. As far as Syria, I think there's a difference of opinion, but certainly there are Republicans who support a no-fly zone and Republicans who don't. I would ask, are there any issues where you would differ with the Republican position, not the Trump position, the Republican position? Because I don't think the Trump position and the Republican positions are necessarily the same.
Another thing I would point out, because I got to only 2 points there, but a third one is I would be careful too how we talk about immigration and securing our borders. We do need to secure our borders. We have 300 to 400,000 folks coming here illegally. But once we do that and we do employer enforcement and some other measures to secure the border, I would have a more moderate approach to how to handle the 12 million folks that are here. I don't think a one-size-fits-all approach works. So some people are good neighbors, doing good in their community. We ought to provide a pathway for legalization. So I think I have a little more moderate approach. In the end, I'm not a blank check for either party or, for that matter, either president. I want to do what's right for this district, and I want to be a defender of our Constitution.
All right, Mr. Bacon, it's now your turn to ask Mr. Ashford a question.
Okay, I want to talk about ISIS and terror. Do you know which cities in Nebraska are on the ISIS kill list? And what would you do after, say, 48 hours after a major attack if one occurred in Nebraska?
I don't know what cities are on the kill list. I've never been briefed on that I know of. If you do, tell me.
I will, but go ahead, finish your time.
Okay, and what's your next question?
Well, it's which cities are on the ISIS kill list from Nebraska, but what would you do if there was a major attack in Nebraska from ISIS? What would be your response?
Well, my first response would be to bring together our local law enforcement people, our Homeland Security people, our FBI, and to deter, number one, first of all, is to aggressively resist the attack, obviously, but and our local law enforcement people need to have and that's why I voted to make sure local law enforcement has the equipment they need if such an attack were to occur, and I voted with the Republican majority to do that. I would then make sure that prior to any attack, hopefully, is that we've had an integrated response to any kind of attack and future attack, and I would have those individuals, those groups, FBI, Homeland Security, the counterintelligence groups, to come together, and I would also make certain that we have access to the technology so that we can find out what sort of additional attacks are occurring. Get into their cell phones, get into into their technology to make sure that something else doesn't happen. But number one, local law enforcement has to have the equipment and the ability to respond. And then we would bring in the national team, the FBI, and who's ever on that team to enforce that.
And a lot of these actions would be done by the governor, of course, in presidential decision. But there is one city on the ISIS kill list, and that's Bellevue. That's because of its association with Offutt Air Force Base. And I think it's important to know because they listed out the cities they want to attack. And someone on the Armed Services Committee should likely know that, I think. But the real reason I brought this up is I have a close relationship with the mayor of Bellevue, who supports me. I've known her when she was a soccer mom. Our kids were playing soccer in the 90s together. And I would talk to her and make sure I knew what she needed, how I could help her out with Congress or any kind of congressional actions. The commander at the 55th Wing right now is someone I've served with 3 times. I would call him. Both county sheriffs, by the way, that are in this district, support me. I would talk to them. The county attorney in Sarpy, who's also a supporter of mine. I have a lot of great relationships that I could leverage, and I would make sure I know how we could support them through my actions in Congress.
And a final word on this?
Yeah, you know, I like all the people that support you, by the way, Don. I certainly like the mayor of Bellevue. She has a lot of enthusiasm. She's a runner, like you and I are. So she's great.
We're talking about Rita Sanders.
We're talking about Rita. Right. She's great, and she does a great job in Bellevue. One of the proudest things that I've been able to do with my colleagues in the delegation, working across the aisles to get that runway done. When you were there, and for years before that, the Offutt runway could not get done. I worked with the White House. The other members of the delegation worked with their strengths. We were able to get the Air Force to go along with that runway, which is going to help protect the 55th's presence there and also protect our national security.
Thank you, Mr. Ashford. We're going to move on now to racial injustice. Okay. In the past year, there's been increased talk about racial tension and racial injustice in this election. Do you believe the Black Lives Matter movement has a valid complaint about racial injustice and the way police sometimes interact with African Americans? Mr. Ashford, you're first.
You know, I served as chairman of the Judiciary Committee for a number of years, and we dealt with these issues all the time. I worked with the Empowerment Network since it was formed in North Omaha. We have in Nebraska some legal responses to some of these problems, and I've talked to many of my friends who are members from the cities that had these issues. One of the things we do here is we have a grand jury automatically impaneled whenever there is a death in the custody of a police officer, when a police officer is involved. That provides transparency and provides the ability for the public to know that that this particular incident has had an immediate look-see. We also, when I was on the Judiciary Committee, we made sure that the Crime Commission collected information on all traffic stops in the community. We know, and anybody can look at where those traffic stops occurred, and that gives us the kind of data that we need. I've also worked to try to promote programs on the state level and on the federal level to prevent violence, many of those.
Mr. Ashford, the question, though, is do you believe the Black Lives Matter has a valid complaint about racial injustice?
Sure, and that's why we have to have you know, I was Amir Abdullah, I thought had a great response to what happened at Northwestern. I would not have knelt, obviously, when the national anthem was played, but those young people had a point, and they had the right to protest. Amir Abdullah in Detroit, who plays for the Lions, had a great idea: bring law enforcement together. This is an opportunity to have a collaboration and a discussion.
Mr. Bacon, 60 seconds.
I would say yes, because there have been some situations that were wrong. The gentleman in the Carolinas that was pulled over, and he was behind on child support payments, and he feared, and he ran, shot in the back. That was wrong. I think Black Lives Matter also has a higher meaning, though, when you look at unemployment rates that are 3 and 4, 5 times higher in those urban areas. We got to fix that. We can't, that's unacceptable. We got to work on that. Or when you look at the victimization rates in the same areas, I really believe in the dream of this country that we're all created equal and we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And we got to work hard to make sure we get there. But I would also say that we need to also defend our law enforcement. They put their lives on the line every day, and we're only talking exceptions of this. Most of them are the best of our American citizens, and it's wrong to throw the entire law enforcement under the bus, as sometimes some people have done. I had a shooting at the base when I was the commander, and one of the things that we did is we brought in someone from the county to investigate it, so folks would know that there was honesty and transparency, no cover-up. And we need to have that philosophy, I believe, when these situations occur.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon.
Let me ask you this.
Could I just respond to a certain extent? Because we actually have a bill in Congress. My Republican colleague Kevin Kramer from North Dakota and David Scott from Georgia, we have a bill that targets, I think it's a very important bill, that targets 18-year-old to 35-year-old black males. 41% of them are unemployed in this country. And what this bill does is in any large public project, that's financed partially publicly or whatever, that the Department of Labor meet with community-based groups in the area where the project is, develop a plan to directly employ black youth, males between 18 and 35. That's the problem Don's talking about. He's right, it needs to be addressed, and this is a bill that can do that in a bipartisan way.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Bacon, if we can continue along on the same track. You said we got to fix this. You cited an example at Offutt, and Mr. Ashford had just mentioned a bill in Washington. What is Congress's role in addressing racial disparity in the country? We've seen local level efforts, but can the federal government actually play a role in addressing the issue of racism in this country and its institutions, the federal government?
We do have a role at the federal government level, but also partnering with the city and the state and the county. It's a team effort. Now, I had a meeting today in North Omaha working with community leaders so I can learn more about how to support these issues. So one of the things we talked about was to ensure that the agencies in Washington, when we find out where to spend money at, that we get it to the right spots that it's working. So I want to ensure from the community that we hear what programs are actually working so we can invest more there and then reduce spending in other areas that are not working. But I think writ large, we got to do more to support our business community. Regulations are making it very hard for small businesses to open and grow. It's the worst economic growth we've had since 1949 coming out of a recession. It's because of the regulatory environment, big government, and we got to do better. And we need some outsiders in Washington that can push this because the insiders and the career politicians aren't getting this done.
Mr. Ashford, is this a federal issue, a state issue, a local issue?
It's all of the above. And I think all hands need to be on deck as we address these issues. I think we both acknowledge that they're out there. Community policing is an incredibly important asset in every community. And I've worked with every police chief since the mid-1980s, and we have had a remarkable number of exceptional police chiefs and members of the force. I mean, we've got a bill in the Congress now, the Kerry-Orozco bill, which gives special status equal to military for the spouse of a law enforcement person who's been killed in action. The federal government has two roles. It needs to make sure that COPS funding, it's a federal program from the Justice Department, is robust, and that goes into helping support community policing. You talk to any chief here, and some of those mentioned by Don that are supporting him, they need that COPS funding. Secondarily, I think we can provide federal guidelines for training on how we deal with violence and how we interact with police and community leaders and people in the community. But the decisions have to be made on the community level. I think there is a funding opportunity as long as it's efficient and earmarked to the right purposes.
I think expanded federal oversight would be a mistake. We want to ensure that our local police have the authority with the mayors and down at the local level. There's more and more proposals about getting the long arm of the federal government to micromanage and do training. There's even talk about federalization of the police force. That's big government, and I would oppose that.
And I absolutely oppose it too. And I've had a lifetime of work with the Omaha Police Division and all the police forces around, both as Judiciary Chair and running the Housing Authority and other community projects I've worked on. It shouldn't be a federal program. What I'm saying is that there is money there for COPS, and the COPS funding program, and it should be robust and it should be expanded to address the concerns that you've raised, and that it enhances cities like ours, and it shouldn't go to every city. It should go to necessarily in the same proportion, because it should go to cities like ours that have actually done the job of enhancing community policing.
We have to move on to immigration now, gentlemen. You both agree the nation's borders need to be strengthened. But this question deals solely with the estimated 11 million immigrants living in this country illegally. Would you consider a pathway to citizenship, or do you side with Donald Trump, who's vowed to deport them all? We start with you, Mr. Ashford.
Well, we're not going to deport 11 million people. I support a path, and always have. I believe it makes sense both economically and on a humanitarian basis that we provide a way for individuals who are here. About 50% of those who are here have overstayed their visas and 50% have not, of the 11 million. We need to find a way for those individuals to earn their pathway to citizenship. Whether it's they have to pay their taxes, they could not have violated the law. They have to adhere to the rules that apply to everybody else. And then I think they should have to apply. And Congress Congress doesn't debate this issue. They talk about securing the borders, which I absolutely support. I don't support a wall, but they've always what politicians say. First of all, secure the wall, then we'll talk about the issue of citizenship. That has to be done in parallel. We need more border security people. We need more technology on the border. We don't need a wall, but we need a pathway to citizenship with clear rules set forth so that individuals know what the rules are and can get there.
Mr. Bacon.
Well, we have a failed policy right now with our immigration. This last 7 years with executive orders, circumventing around Congress, it's been wrong. President Obama's been wrong with these executive orders. Supported by Nancy Pelosi, who Brad Ashford wants to have a speaker again here this next term, which would be bad. And I think the thing that we have to do with the 11 to 12 million folks who are here, it has to be connected in a more comprehensive way with securing the border. You're not going to be able to come up with a compromise with the 11 or 12 million here unless folks in our country know that we have secured the border. And I think it's going to involve employer enforcement so folks cannot get jobs when they come here illegally. But once you do that, then I think people will be more willing to discuss how do we handle appropriately and with compassion of the 11 and 12 million people who are here. I oppose pathway to citizenship for those who come here illegally because people have been waiting for 10 years to do it right. But I think there's a pathway for legalized status for those who are working and are good community neighbors and are good neighbors in general. But those who are bad or have had crimes, who are not supporting themselves, then we need to ask them to go back home.
If someone's committed a crime, they have to go back home. And actually, under President Obama, he has issued executive orders because Congress has failed to act. The excuse given by those who oppose immigration reform, and I don't think you can say to a young dreamer who came here at 2 or 3 years old, that's gone to school here, has lived a good life, has played sports, is a constructive part of the school and of the community, you can't say that they can't earn citizenship. Why on earth can that young person not have an opportunity to earn citizenship? But we've deported more people than we've ever deported before because Congress has failed to act and set forth rules and regulations. Bush had a bill that I supported and do support now, something like it. It passed the Senate and the Congress wouldn't even take it up. Speaker Boehner wouldn't even take it up.
We're not deporting more people than ever. We're actually releasing folks. It's catch and release. That's a mistake, and we were letting people out of jail that were arrested who've gone on to commit crimes. It's wrong. It was because of President Obama's executive orders, of which Brad Ashford helped fund those executive orders. We should have taken a harder line with our Homeland Security funding when this came up. In the end, we have between 300 and 400,000 people coming here illegally or overstaying their visas every year. That's more than the United States Air Force. We got to do better. We got to secure that border, do employer enforcement, and then we can do the compassionate right thing with the folks who are here. It won't be a one-size-fits-all approach, though.
Next question.
I need to respond to that. My vote on Homeland Security, as you may know, Don, was not what you just suggested. I voted to maintain and keep the Homeland Security office open. What the vote was in fact to not to support the executive order. I voted against my party on that because I would never vote to shut down Homeland Security. That was the vote. It was cynical. It was a gotcha vote. But I would never vote to shut them down. But also, David Young and I, as you know, have the Sarah Root bill. The Sarah Root bill, David Young from Iowa, a Republican, we have a bipartisan bill which says if you've committed a violent crime, ICE must take custody of that person, and so that what happened to Sarah Root can never happen again. We are responding. We are responding.
We have to let Mr. Bacon. Go ahead.
Yeah, initially he voted against it, then he voted for it. It's the standard Brad Ashford flip-flop on this.
Come on, Don.
The thing is, we have to, when an executive order comes out that breaks the law, the Congress has to take a hard line because the separation of powers demands it. And Brad caved on this to the president, and so we've been working in a very dysfunctional immigration environment, and Brad is part of the problem.
All right, let's do this.
Let's do
this. Let's continue the discussion on immigration. You each have 30 seconds on this particular specific question. We've seen the images of Syrian refugees, including children fleeing that war-torn country. About 50 of those Syrian refugees have actually resettled in Omaha since May. Donald Trump and others want to ban all Syrian refugees from coming to this country. Would you support such a ban, and what would you do with the Syrian refugees that have settled in Nebraska? 30 seconds, we'll start with you.
So right now we have 10,000 folks arriving here, and there's a proposal for 50,000 more. I think we should say no to never, but we need to do very good vetting, because the role of the government is to protect our citizens and defend our constitutional rights. And to allow in the 10,000 without hard vetting, you know ISIS is trying, they've already announced that they're trying to infiltrate through those refugees. So I think what we've got to do is carefully vet and be very careful. We're better off trying to protect refugees closer to home with the safe havens.
Mr. Ashford, 30 seconds on Syrian refugees here in Nebraska.
First of all, there are about 6,000 Syrian refugees here. There are 4 million refugees from Syria. There are 6 million displaced persons in Syria. We have taken 6,000. Congressman Charlie Dent from Pennsylvania and Congressman Hudson from North Carolina, both Republicans, came to me and asked if I would be the Democrat co-sponsor on a refugee bill that would provide for more robust vetting. I was, and I am, and Homeland Security and FBI have changed the vetting rules so that when a refugee comes here, after 18 to 24 months of vetting by the UN and the FBI and Homeland Security, they come here and they're vetted for the first year that they're here, and then at the end of the first year, which is a change, and it was a response to the bill that we introduced, they have to go through another background check. So I think we should allow the refugees to come in. They should comply with the procedures that have been implemented. But there have, as far as I know, no incident, certainly in Nebraska, involving a refugee where there's been a terrorist act that I know of.
But we'll leave it there. We're going to have to leave it there at immigration. Let's get to the TV and radio ads that so many of our viewers and listeners and readers have seen. Both of you seem like honest guys, but it looks like both of your respective political parties are running fear-mongering ads on television and radio that distort your opponent's record. Mr. Ashford, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is running an ad suggesting your opponent wants to immediately raise the retirement age for Social Security for everybody, even though he has said he would not change the retirement age for anyone nearing retirement. Do you support these ads, and what would you say here tonight about Social Security?
I just don't support raising the retirement age. I don't think you need to do that at all, ever, whether it's going back to 40 years old or 30 years old or 20 years old. I think there's another plan to make Social Security sustainable for 75 years, which doesn't involve raising the retirement age. I think that's a reduction in benefits. So that's my position.
What about the ad? Or do you
what does the ad say, actually?
The ad has a couple that is sitting on the couch, and pretty much they say that they've learned that Mr. Bacon wants to raise Social Security. They've worked long and hard in their lives, and they just found out that they may have to work longer and harder. They can't trust Mr. Bacon, don't want to
I think the message, that's not our ad, obviously, and we have no control over those, but I think the point that's being made in the ads is that raising the retirement age is not good policy. I don't think, Don called it scaremongering, but I don't think that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to graphically show that raising the retirement age is not a good policy.
Want to respond?
Yes, I would love to. First of all, I do not want to raise the retirement age for those in retirement or nearing retirement. We have to make that clear. The ads from Nancy Pelosi, and she's trying her best to re-elect Brad because she wants her guy in the House, but she's working her best to do that, but it's a lie. I've said those who are younger, under 30, that we should consider it, because we used to have 42 people paying in for every one taken out. Now it's 3, and soon it's going to be 2 to 1. Leaders step up and provide solutions and try to fix a problem. Politicians like Brad and Nancy Pelosi want to demagogue issues and politicize it. I frankly have not heard a good proposal from Brad on Social Security.
I'll give you one.
We don't have time to give it.
I've not heard one.
Well,
He's been quiet.
I'll give you one. And the Nancy Pelosi stuff, Don, is fine, and I know it's good politics, and you keep talking about me as a career politician. The week after I got elected, you decided to run for office, and you know what you said? We need a change. I didn't even unpack my luggage in Washington. And you
voted for Nancy Pelosi already.
I'm sure I voted for Nancy Pelosi. But I voted against Nancy Pelosi on most every major initiative.
It's not true.
It is true. It is
Almost
true.
80% of the times you voted for.
You know what those votes are? Those, for the most part, what happens in Congress. And and this stuff you need to study.
I'm not a career legislator like you are. You're
Well,
right.
you're a good military guy, but I think and you are, and I commend you for that. But I have, and your service is commendable without question. But I've had 18 years of being a legislator, and it is complicated, it is different. And no, what those votes
Mr.
are.
Ashford, we're going to have to go to break.
Okay, but those votes are procedural votes. And I'd be happy
80%
to
of the
explain
time,
them.
he votes with Nancy Pelosi.
Those are procedural votes,
He's only a moderate if you're in California or New York, not Nebraska.
All right, we're going to stop you both right there. It's time for our second and final commercial break. When we come back, closing statements from each candidate. You are watching the Ashford-Bacon Congressional debate on KMTV in tandem with the Omaha World Herald.